Hi, I'm Grace, a single mother, a teacher, and, as my own mother once said, the stain on the Whitfield family name. 3 years after being cast out, I received a wedding invitation from my sister, along with a cold little note. Savannah insists you attend. I planned to ignore it, until my daughter looked at me and said, Mom, I want to meet them, just once. I had no idea that on that day, wearing a Target dress among a sea of silk gowns, my daughter would stand up and silence the entire Texas elite. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about courage and the kind of family you get to choose. Before I share everything that happened, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for your child. Or if your own family ever made you feel small. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, cream-colored cardstock so thick it could stand on its own. I traced my finger over the gold embossing. Eleanor Whitfield requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of her daughter, Savannah Marie. My mother hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter in our modest Dallas apartment, next to Sophie's math homework and a stack of papers I needed to grade. My daughter looked up from her cereal, her dark eyes curious. What's that, Mama? An invitation, I said carefully, to your Aunt Savannah's wedding. Sophie's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. At 10 years old, she understood more than I sometimes gave her credit for. She knew we had family somewhere, people whose photos didn't hang on our walls, whose names we rarely spoke. The aunt I've never met? I nodded, pouring myself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. The invitation hadn't just come with the wedding details. There was a handwritten note on Eleanor's personal stationery. It's time to put the past behind us. Savannah insists you attend. Savannah insisted. Not Eleanor. Never Eleanor. 3 years ago, when David left us for his 22-year-old assistant, Eleanor had called me exactly once. Not to offer comfort or support, but to tell me this was what happened when you married below your station, when you had a child out of proper Southern society, when you were, in her words, a stain on the family name. I'd hung up on her mid-sentence and changed my phone number the next day. Now here was this invitation, heavy with expectation and old money. Magnolia Hills was only a 3-hour drive from Dallas, but it might as well have been another planet. A world of debutante balls and country clubs where your grandmother's maiden name mattered more than your character. Can we go? Sophie asked, and something in her voice made me look at her more closely. I'd like to meet them. Just once. My daughter, who had her father's stubborn chin but my eyes, who wrote stories about families with grandparents and cousins and aunts who sent birthday cards. My daughter, who had grown up with just the two of us against the world. I'll think about it, I told her, but we both knew I'd already decided. The drive to Magnolia Hills felt like traveling backward through time. Dallas's skyline faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by endless stretches of bluebonnets and cattle ranches. Sophie had her nose pressed to the window, taking in every detail. It's so green, she whispered. Different from the city, I agreed, though my hands tightened on the steering wheel as we passed the city limits sign. Magnolia Hills, where tradition lives. The Whitfield estate sat on the edge of town, a sprawling antebellum-style mansion that had been modernized with every possible luxury. Cars already lined the curved driveway, BMWs, Mercedes, a few Bentleys. I parked my 10-year-old Honda between a Porsche and a Range Rover. Remember what we talked about? I said to Sophie as we gathered our things. Best manners. Stay close to me. She smoothed down her yellow sundress, the nicest thing she owned, bought specially for today. I'd chosen a simple gray sheath dress from Target. Professional but unremarkable. We were sparrows among peacocks, but we held our heads high. The transformation of the estate took my breath away. White tents stretched across the lawn, draped in magnolia garlands and twinkling lights. A string quartet played on the veranda. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with silver trays. Grace, I turned to find Savannah gliding toward us in a silk robe, her wedding party fluttering behind her like butterflies. My half-sister had inherited all of Eleanor's delicate features: the pointed chin, the alabaster skin, the pale blue eyes that could freeze or thaw at will. "You came," she said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. She glanced at Sophie, and something flickered across her face. "And you brought her." "Her name is Sophie," I said evenly. "Sophie, this is your Aunt Savannah." Sophie stepped forward, hand extended like I'd taught her. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." Savannah barely touched her fingers before pulling back. "How sweet." She turned back to me, lowering her voice. "Listen, Grace, I'm glad you're here. Really. But this is a traditional Southern wedding. Important people will be here. Jonathan's family, Mother's friends from the club. Try to keep her," a glance at Sophie, "from causing any disruptions." The words stung, but I'd expected them. "We'll be perfect guests." "Good." She air-kissed my cheek, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume. "The ceremony starts at 4. Try to sit toward the back." As she swept away, Sophie's hand found mine. "She doesn't like me." "She doesn't know you," I corrected, though my heart ached at the truth in her words. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of unfamiliar faces and calculating glances. I recognized a few people from my childhood: Mrs. Henderson from the country club, Judge Morrison and his wife. They looked through me as if I were invisible, or worse, whispered behind manicured hands when they thought I wasn't looking. Sophie stayed close, overwhelmed by the grandeur. The wedding venue was spectacular. The estate's chapel had been decorated like something from a fairy tale. Roses and baby's breath draped every surface. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls. "It's like a princess castle," Sophie whispered. Before I could respond, a warm voice spoke behind us. "More like a museum, if you ask me. Can't touch anything without someone having a heart attack." I turned to find a woman in her 70s, wearing a modest but elegant navy dress. Her eyes were kind, with laugh lines that suggested a life well lived. "I'm May," she said, extending a hand. "Jonathan's great aunt, and you must be the infamous Grace." "Infamous?" I managed to laugh. "That's a new one." "Oh, honey, in a family like the Whitfields, anyone who chooses their own path becomes infamous." She winked at Sophie. "And who's this beauty?" "I'm Sophie," my daughter said, clearly charmed. "Are you really related to the groom?" "Guilty as charged, though sometimes I wonder how I ended up in this bunch." May's eyes found mine over Sophie's head. "I've heard about you, you know. The daughter who dared to become a teacher instead of marrying into oil money. Good for you." Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared, ushering everyone to their seats. True to Savannah's wishes, Sophie and I found spots in the back row. May surprised me by sliding in beside us. "Best view in the house," she said with a wink. "You can see everything from back here." The ceremony was everything a high society Southern wedding should be. Savannah floated down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my yearly salary. French lace and pearl beading, a train that went on forever. Jonathan waited at the altar, handsome in that prep school way, his smile tight with what looked like nervousness. Or maybe I was projecting. The reception moved to the grand ballroom, where tables groaned under the weight of crystal and china. Sophie and I were seated at table 12, clearly the obligation invites table, along with some distant cousins and Jonathan's father's secretary. "The kids' table is over there," a server informed me, pointing to a small table in the corner where a few bored-looking children picked at their plates. "She'll stay with me," I said firmly. Sophie did her best. She ate carefully, spoke only when spoken to, and didn't complain when the other guests at our table ignored us completely. I watched her watching everything: the way the women held their forks, the casual way they discussed European vacations and boarding schools. "I need to use the restroom," she whispered after the main course. "I'll come with you." "I can go myself, Mama. I remember where it is." I hesitated, but she was 10, not a baby. "Straight there and back." She nodded solemnly and slipped away. I watched her navigate between the tables, my heart tight with a pride that was tinged with sadness. She shouldn't have to try so hard just to exist in a room. The band struck up a slow song, and couples moved onto the dance floor. I was debating whether we could politely leave after the cake cutting when I heard it. A crash of glass, a gasp, then silence spreading like a wave across the room. I was on my feet before my brain processed what I was seeing. Sophie stood frozen near the head table, her yellow dress splattered with brown liquid. A glass lay shattered at her feet, sweet tea pooling across the white marble floor. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the spreading brown stain across the front of Savannah's wedding dress. My sister stood there, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and then fury. The entire room held its breath, 300 guests watching like it was dinner theater. "I'm sorry," Sophie whispered, her voice tiny in the vast space. "Someone bumped into me and I—" The slap echoed like a gunshot. Savannah's hand connected with Sophie's face hard enough to send my daughter stumbling backward. She fell, her knee hitting the marble with a crack that made me flinch. I don't remember crossing the room. One moment I was by our table, the next I was kneeling beside Sophie, gathering her into my arms as she sobbed. Her cheek was already reddening, her knee bleeding through torn tights. "How dare you!" Savannah shrieked, seemingly unaware or uncaring that she'd just struck a child. "Do you have any idea what this dress cost? It's ruined! Absolutely ruined!" Eleanor materialized beside her daughter, her face a mask of cold fury. "This is what comes of bringing a child with no breeding to a civilized event." Her eyes found mine. "Can't you even control her, Grace? Or are you as much of a failure as a mother as you were as a wife?" Something inside me snapped. The years of silence, of taking the high road, of protecting Sophie from their poison. It all dissolved in an instant. "My daughter accidentally spilled a drink," I said, my voice deadly calm as I helped Sophie to her feet. "Your daughter assaulted a child. Which one of us failed as a parent?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. In families like the Whitfields, you didn't say the quiet parts out loud. "She ruined my wedding," Savannah's voice climbed higher. "Look at me, I look like trash, just like her mother. No wonder her father ran off. Probably couldn't stand having such worthless—" "Stop!" Sophie's voice cut through the hysteria. She stepped forward, my hand on her shoulder, tears streaming down her face but her chin raised. "I said I was sorry, but you don't get to hit me, and you don't get to talk about my mama like that." The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. "My mama is the best person in this whole room," Sophie continued, her voice gaining strength. "She works hard and helps kids learn and never says mean things about anybody, even when they deserve it. I'm sorry about your dress, but you're not a very nice person, Aunt Savannah. And neither are you, Grandmother Eleanor." May started clapping. Slowly, deliberately, the sound sharp in the silence. A few others joined her. A cousin here, a server there. Not many, but enough. Eleanor's face went white. "Get out. Both of you. Now." "No." I pulled out my phone. "We're not going anywhere until the police arrive." "You wouldn't dare," Eleanor hissed. "Watch me." I dialed 911, my hand steady now. "I'd like to report an assault on a minor." The Magnolia Hills police arrived within 10 minutes. Probably a record for the sleepy town. 2 officers, both looking deeply uncomfortable at being called to the Whitfield estate. "What seems to be the problem here?" the older officer asked, though his eyes had already taken in the scene. Sophie's red cheek, her torn dress, Savannah in her stained gown. "A misunderstanding," Eleanor said smoothly. "A family matter. Surely we can—" "My 10-year-old daughter was struck in the face by an adult," I interrupted. "Hard enough to knock her down. I want to press charges." The younger officer knelt beside Sophie. "Hey there, sweetheart. Can you tell me what happened?" Sophie looked at me, and I nodded. In a clear voice, she recounted the events. The man who'd bumped into her, the spilled tea, the slap. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one contradicted her. "It was an accident," Savannah protested. "I was upset about my dress." "You can't, seriously." "Ma'am, striking a child is assault, regardless of the circumstances," the older officer said. "We'll need to take statements." What followed was surreal. The fairy tale wedding became a crime scene. Officers interviewed guests, took photos of Sophie's injuries, documented the scene. Someone, I later learned it was May, had recorded the whole thing on her phone and quietly showed it to the police. "This is ridiculous," Eleanor kept saying. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who we are?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied patiently. "That's why we're being extra thorough." Jonathan, I noticed, had disappeared somewhere between the slap and the police arrival. Several guests quietly slipped away, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. But others stayed, watching with the fascination of people witnessing a train wreck. "We can offer a choice," the officer finally said. "We can arrest Miss Whitfield now, or she can appear at the station Monday morning for processing." Eleanor's face went from white to red. "This is your doing," she hissed at me. "You've destroyed our family's reputation. You've ruined your sister's life." "No," I said quietly. "Savannah did that herself when she chose to hit a child." As we prepared to leave for the hospital, the officers wanted Sophie's injuries documented, May pressed a card into my hand. "I have good lawyers," she said quietly. "Use them." The emergency room doctor was gentle but thorough. Sophie's cheek was badly bruised. Her knee needed cleaning and bandaging, but nothing was broken. They took photographs, wrote reports, created a paper trail that couldn't be ignored or buried under Whitfield money. "You did the right thing," the doctor said quietly as she bandaged Sophie's knee. "Too many people stay silent." Back at our hotel, a modest Best Western on the outskirts of town, I held Sophie as she finally let herself cry properly. Not the shocked tears from earlier, but deep, hurt sobs that broke my heart. "Why does she hate us so much?" she asked. "What did we do wrong?" "Nothing, baby. Absolutely nothing." I stroked her hair, feeling my own tears fall. "Some people are just broken inside, and they try to break others to feel better." "But we're family." "No," I said firmly. "Family doesn't hurt you. Family protects you. May is more family to us than Eleanor or Savannah ever were." My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Texts, calls, voicemails. I finally turned it off, but not before seeing one message from an unknown number. "Check social media." May curiosity got the better of me. I opened Twitter on my laptop while Sophie dozed beside me. The video was everywhere. Texas bride slaps child at 500K wedding. Whitfield wedding assault goes viral. Southern hospitality at its worst. Someone, probably one of the younger guests, had uploaded May's recording. The slap, Sophie's fall, her brave words afterward. The view count was climbing by the minute. Comments poured in, overwhelmingly supportive of Sophie, condemning Savannah. By morning, it had reached national news. We stayed in Texas for 3 more days, working with the police and prosecutor. Sophie was brave through it all, giving her statement, identifying the video as accurate, standing tall even when it hurt. Eleanor left 17 voicemails. I listened to exactly one. "You've destroyed us. That video is everywhere. Savannah's lost her job. Jonathan called off the wedding. You've ruined everything, just like you always do. I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sorry either. The prosecutor offered a plea deal. Savannah would plead guilty to simple assault, pay a fine, do community service, and attend anger management. No jail time, but a criminal record that would follow her forever. "It's your choice," the prosecutor said. "We can go to trial if you prefer." I looked at Sophie. "What do you think, baby?" She thought for a long moment. "I don't want to come back here. I just want to go home." So we took the deal. May drove us to the courthouse, having appointed herself our unofficial guardian. "That took guts," she said as we waited. "Both of you. I'm proud to know you." Savannah looked different in court. Smaller, somehow. without her wedding finery and crowd of supporters. She pled guilty in a voice barely above a whisper. Didn't look at us once. Eleanor wasn't there. "Can I say something?" Sophie asked the judge. The judge, a woman with kind eyes, nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Sophie stood, favoring her injured knee. "I forgive her," she said simply. "But I don't want to see her again. Ever." The judge's eyes softened. "That's very mature of you, young lady." As we left the courthouse, May handed me an envelope. "A little something to help with a fresh start," she said, waving off my protests. "And my number's in there. You call if you need anything at all." The drive back to Dallas felt different. Lighter, somehow, despite everything. Sophie was quiet, but not sad, watching the landscape roll by with thoughtful eyes. "Mama?" she said as we hit the city limits. "I'm glad we went." I glanced at her in surprise. "You are?" "Yeah, now I know." She paused. "I know who my real family is. It's you, and Mrs. Chen next door, and my teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, and Aunt May now, too. Family isn't about blood, is it?" "No, baby, it's not." And I'm glad I stood up to them, even though I was scared. "I'm proud of you," I said, my throat tight. "So proud. I'm proud of you too, Mama, for protecting me, for not letting them make us feel small." 10 years old, and already wiser than most adults I knew. We got home to find our apartment door decorated with paper hearts and a banner reading, "Welcome home, heroes." Mrs. Chen bustled out, enveloping us in hugs and the smell of fresh dumplings. "I saw the news," she said. "That little girl, standing up to those horrible people. And you, Grace, being such a fierce mama bear. Come, I made dinner." Our tiny apartment, with its secondhand furniture and walls covered in Sophie's artwork, felt more like home than the Whitfield mansion ever had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The video had indeed gone viral, sparking conversations about child abuse, privilege, and standing up to family bullies. Interview requests poured in, but we declined them all. This wasn't about fame or revenge. Sophie started therapy to process what had happened. Her therapist, Dr. Martinez, was wonderful, gentle but direct, helping Sophie understand that none of it was her fault. "She's remarkably resilient," Dr. Martinez told me after a session. "You've raised a strong, confident child. That moment of standing up to her aunt, that came from knowing she's loved and valued." At school, Sophie became something of a hero. Kids who'd barely noticed her before suddenly wanted to be friends with the girl who'd told off mean rich people. She handled it with grace, staying close to her true friends while being kind to everyone. 3 months after the wedding, I got an unexpected call from my principal. "Grace, I've had an interesting phone call. The district wants to offer you a position as an anti-bullying coordinator. It would mean working with all the schools in the district, developing programs, training teachers, and," she paused, "a significant raise." I stared at the phone. "Why me? Are you kidding? After that video went viral, you've become something of a symbol. A parent who stood up for their child, who didn't let wealth or family pressure silence them. They think you'd be perfect for reaching other parents and kids." It felt surreal, but I took the job. 6 months after the wedding, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a beautiful leather journal and a handwritten letter. "Grace, you don't know me, but I was at the wedding. I'm Jonathan's cousin. I wanted to thank you. That day, watching you protect your daughter, watching her stand up to Savannah, it gave me the courage to finally leave my own toxic family situation. Your daughter's voice that day didn't just silence that room. It gave others permission to speak. Thank you both." Sarah. More letters came. From people who'd seen the video, who'd found courage in Sophie's words. From parents who'd stood up to family bullies. From children who'd learned they deserved better. Sophie kept them all in a special box, reading them when she had hard days. Jonathan reached out once through May. A simple card. "Thank you for showing me who she really was before it was too late." Your daughter saved me from a lifetime of misery. I hope she knows she's a hero. Even some of Eleanor's society friends quietly reached out, sharing their own stories of family cruelty dressed up as tradition. May became a regular part of our lives, visiting Dallas once a month, taking Sophie to museums and bookstores, filling the grandmother role with joy and laughter instead of judgment and conditions. You know what the funny thing is? She said one day over tea. Eleanor and Savannah thought they were protecting their precious family legacy. But what legacy is that? Cruelty? Snobbery? You and Sophie, you're creating a real legacy, one of courage and kindness. A year later, we received another cream-colored envelope. My stomach clenched, but Sophie opened it calmly. Grace, I know I have no right to contact you. I've been in therapy, working on myself, trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt a child. I'm writing to say I'm sorry, not to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. But Sophie deserves to hear that none of it was her fault. She was perfect that day. I was the one who was broken. I've enclosed a check. I know money doesn't fix anything, but maybe it can go toward her college fund. I'm sorry I wasn't the aunt she deserved. Savannah. The check was substantial. We put it in Sophie's college fund, but the apology meant more. Do you want to write back? I asked Sophie. She thought about it for days before penning a simple response. Thank you for saying sorry. I hope you're getting better. Maybe someday you can be the aunt some other little girl deserves? Sophie. Eleanor never wrote, but through May's careful intelligence network, we learned she'd quietly retired from most of her society positions. The Whitfield name still carried weight in Magnolia Hills, but it was tarnished now, associated with the viral video that wouldn't die. Pride goeth before a fall, May said with more sadness than satisfaction. She could have had 2 wonderful granddaughters. Instead, she has nothing but her pride. 2 years after the wedding, we hosted our own gathering. Not in a mansion or a country club, but in the park near our apartment, under a sprawling oak tree. We called it our chosen family picnic. Mrs. Chen brought dumplings. Sophie's teacher brought her famous cornbread. May drove up from Houston with a car full of desserts. My fellow teachers came with their families. Sophie's friends ran around playing tag while the adults talked and laughed. Mama, Sophie said, flopping down beside me on the blanket. Look how many people came. I surveyed our makeshift party. A beautiful mishmash of ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds. No designer dresses or luxury cars, just people who showed up for each other. This is wealth, I told her. Real wealth. As the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of pink and gold, Sophie stood up with a piece of paper. I wrote something, she announced. Can I read it? Everyone quieted, gathering closer. 2 years ago, I learned something important, she read, her voice clear and strong. I learned that family isn't about blood or money or fancy last names. Family is about who shows up when you're hurt, who celebrates when you're happy, who teaches you to stand tall even when your knees are shaking. I used to wish I had a big family like the kids in books. Now I know I do. It just doesn't look like I thought it would. It looks like Mrs. Chen teaching me to make dumplings, like Aunt May driving 3 hours just to take me to the science museum, like my mom working hard every day to make the world better for kids who get bullied. To everyone here, you're my family, the family we chose, the family we made, and I wouldn't trade you for all the wedding dresses and mansions in Texas. There wasn't a dry eye in the park. As applause broke out, I pulled Sophie close, kissing the top of her head. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she said, snuggling into my side. Later, as we packed up the remnants of our picnic, May pulled me aside. You know what the most beautiful thing about today was? What? Sophie's not afraid anymore. Of speaking up, of taking up space, of being herself. That little girl who got slapped at that wedding? She didn't just survive it. She transformed it into strength. I watched my daughter helping Mrs. Chen carry containers to her car, chattering away about school and friends and the book she was reading. May was right. The scared, silent child who'd walked into that wedding was gone, replaced by this confident, kind, brave young woman. Thank you, I told May, for everything, for standing by us that day. Oh, honey, May said, hugging me tight. Thank you for showing an old woman what real courage looks like. You and Sophie didn't just change your own lives that day. You changed mine, too. As we drove home through the Dallas streets, Sophie already half asleep in the back seat, I thought about Eleanor's voicemail from so long ago. This will follow you forever. She was right. It would follow us forever, but not as shame or scandal. It would follow us as the moment we chose ourselves, the moment we refused to be silent. The moment a 10-year-old girl's voice rang out clear and true, saying what needed to be said. Sometimes the most profound acts of courage come in small packages. Sometimes the voice that changes everything belongs to a child brave enough to say, "You don't get to hurt me." And sometimes, just sometimes, standing up to the people who should love you but don't teaches you to recognize the people who do. "We're home, baby," I whispered, pulling into our parking spot. Sophie stirred, blinking sleepily. "Home," she repeated, and smiled. Yes, we were home. Not just in our little apartment, but in ourselves, in our truth, in our chosen family. And that was worth more than all the Whitfield money in the world.